Hey, everybody. Good morning again. Before I dive into the message this morning, I wanted to bring a quick update with you as we were talking about giving and just some things going on. I wanted to mention, and some of you have been following with our e-news and you subscribe to that. And so maybe you already know, but for the past, several weeks now, going back to the beginning of December last month, we went into our year-end offering. We were talking about the goals that we had set to come around our partners at Springs of Hope Kenya. We wanted to send $30,000, such a critical investment that we make each year to make sure that those 60 plus kids have access to education and their basic needs are being met. And we also had a goal to raise $40,000 that's going to help us get our lobby renovated to a space that becomes more than just a transition in and out kind of hallway-like space, but really a place where we can gather and experience connections and community, a place that's even going to include a family-friendly restroom that is ADA compliant and wheelchair accessible. All things we're super excited about, but we were talking about this massive goal of $70,000. And I want to bring you the final update on where that stands today because we did not meet that goal. But we actually blew it out of the water. We didn't raise $70,000, but more like $84,000, Cypress. And so honestly don't know why I'm so blown. Like when I saw that number, I was just, almost in tears, just blown away at I'm getting choked up right now. Just blown away by your faithfulness and your generosity. And Cypress, it truly is just a joy and an honor to be a part of this community and the ways that you give. And so I'm just so proud of you. And so thankful to be a part of all of this with you. So just wanted to bring that exciting update with you. You'll hear more as we begin this project and take additional next steps out here. And we'll be bringing you those updates along the way. But let's dive into our message this morning. So I thought I'd lead off with this because I think that all of us have had this experience, kind of this awkward, uncomfortable experience of being confronted with direct questions about something that you did or did not do, right? And so a few examples. In fact, these are some very close to home kind of examples for us. These are questions that have actually been asked within our household, okay? And I won't say who was doing the asking with these or who was being asked, but these are questions like, why is there a huge mess in the kitchen, right? Or why were you marked absent in second period today? Or here's one, why did you eat so much ice cream that it made you have to throw up later that day, like right afterwards? Like, why did you do that? Or how did you manage to lose your car keys on a roller coaster? That's another story for another time, maybe. Or this last one, this is absolutely based on a true story with some of our kids when they were a little younger, but this last question, why did you take those scrap bricks out of the backyard and decide to make a potty out of those bricks and then think that it was a good idea to actually use that potty in the backyard? Why? To this day, I'd like to know the answer to some of these questions. But you've been on the receiving end of questions like this, though, too, haven't you? Questions like, where were you when I needed you? Why were you dishonest with me? Why did you quit? Why did you stay? Why did you quit or skip leg day again? Questions like this. And usually our response begins, almost always, we're asked questions like this, and our response is almost something like this. Because. Almost always it starts with that. And almost always what comes after that is either a reason or an excuse. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two. And here's where I'm going with this today, and really for the next few weeks. You see, we all know, we're starting a brand new year, and this is the time when it's common for us to set some goals, right? And so maybe this looks like some things that we want, some good things that we want to bring with us from last year into this new year, but maybe that looks like some changes that we want to make, and some things that we want to do a little bit differently, some things that maybe we want to leave behind, right? Because new year, new you. And so whether that's in our finances, or maybe it's in our health and our fitness, maybe it's in our relationships and our mental health. Maybe it's even in our spiritual journeys. I'm guessing that all of you have some specific areas in your life where you would like to grow. But we all know how this so often goes, right? With these New Year goals and resolutions and things like that. We start with the best intentions. But then so often it eventually goes from, I am going to get in shape this year to, I don't have to work out every week, to, I'm actually happy with how I am right now, So what happened? How did we get there? I mean, what's coming between us and the goals that we set for ourselves and the changes that we want to make or even need to make? Like, what's holding us back? And when it comes to moving forward, whatever that might look like for you, some of our greatest enemies are the excuses that we make. And so as we start 2026 together, whatever you're holding on to or whatever you're leaving behind, here's my New Year challenge for every single one of us, that all of us should get into the habit of leaving behind our excuses. Because excuses really are kind of like paper walls, okay? Now, I'm going to ask you to use your imagination a little bit because this is really kind of like more like a piece of a wall, right? A part of a wall. Or maybe if you can just imagine you're only this tall, then this is a huge paper wall, right? But that's what our excuses are like. They're like paper walls. And from a distance, I mean, a paper wall looks solid, right? It looks like a legitimate wall. It looks secure and impenetrable. And so from a distance, we see these paper walls and we think, well, there's no way I'm getting through that. So why even try? Like, what choices do we really have? In fact, from a distance, excuses really don't look like excuses at all. They look like perfectly good reasons. And here's the thing. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I mean, both reasons and excuses tend to start with becauses, right? I mean, have you noticed this? It starts with becauses. I mean, we get asked these hard questions. Why did you? Why didn't you? And so often we just throw out our becauses. Right? I mean, we said we'd do something, or we wanted to start doing something, or we promised to stop doing something. But then we didn't. Because. And more often than not, what follows that because is an excuse cleverly disguised as a reason. And the tricky part is, they sound almost identical. Right? And we know this is true, that there's a very fine line between a reason and an excuse. And the reason why we know this is true is because we're really good at spotting that difference, the difference between the two in other people. Right? I mean, we can spot this from a mile away in someone else, and what do we say? We say, you know what? You're just making excuses. Stop making excuses. Don't give me excuses. Give me results, And we see this all the time in our kids. We see it in maybe our grandkids, or maybe in our coworkers and teammates and our friends. And it's like, I know exactly what you're doing here. You're building a paper wall, and you're trying to convince me that it's a real one. But here's the problem. We can spot these in someone else from a mile away, but we miss it from 6 inches away when it's staring back at us in the mirror. And so this is where I want you to at least consider this possibility this morning. Just consider the possibility that what if your reason, I mean, the reasons maybe that have even come up already this morning, maybe reasons that you've been kind of falling back on for the past couple of weeks, maybe reasons that you've been leaning on for as long as you can remember. What if your reasons are really paper walls? What if the thing that you've been calling a reason is really actually just an excuse in disguise? And here's so often what we say, right? I mean, just kind of playing this out a little bit. I mean, we say it's because I'm too busy. Or it's because I couldn't resist. Or it's because, that's not really in my wheelhouse. Or, it's not really even that big of a deal. Or it's because I'm too old or too young or too tired. Or I have a headache. And we say them like they're reasons, but so often they're really just paper walls. And hiding underneath those excuses are the real reasons. The reasons that we don't want to admit to ourselves or to anyone else, because the real reason is, I'm afraid. Or maybe the real reason is, I'm just too angry, I'm resentful, I'm bitter, or maybe I'm just insecure. I'm struggling with inadequacies. I'm intimidated or simply just not interested, right? I actually love this moment on the TV show Friends. If you remember the show Friends from the 90s, and Phoebe, one of our favorite characters in the show, there's this moment, that time when her friends were asking her if she could help them move into their new apartment. And I love her response. I've actually used this a few times over the years, where she says, oh, I wish I could, but I don't want to. Like, she couldn't come up with, I don't have anything else going on today, I'm not really injured, but I just don't want to, right? So no excuses, no paper walls, just an honest response. So what if we all did that? What if we were just all that honest and we all just got real with our excuses and just started acknowledging them as the manufactured paper walls that they really are? Wouldn't that be kind of refreshing? So here's a little exercise that you can practice later on at home with your family, maybe with your spouse or with your kids or just whoever you came to church with today. The next time you're about to answer a question with because, catch yourself and just say this instead. Here's my excuse, right? So why did you drop the ball again? Here's my excuse. And do you know the reason why we don't say that? Why we're less inclined to say that is because even just hearing ourselves say those words out loud exposes how weak and thin our paper walls really are, right? I mean, as soon as we frame it up honestly like that, it's like we can't even argue with ourselves. I heard what I said, and I gave you my excuse, and yeah, it's lame, okay? It is weak. But we prop up these paper walls because maybe we've never actually identified the real reasons underneath those paper walls. And even if we have, we don't want to admit what they are. In fact, to be fair, these reasons, the real reasons underneath, they have reasons. Right? In fact, some of your paper walls might be made up of words that someone said to you or said about you. Some of our paper walls are made up of labels that have been placed on you sometime in your past. Maybe it was an expectation that was placed over us that we just couldn't meet, and so we've walked through life feeling like failures, and that's what's making up our paper wall. So often these paper walls are made up of lies that we believe about ourselves. And so anytime one of these opportunities or these topics come up, it's like, nope, I'm not going there again. I've been there, done that, and I failed. And so the paper walls go up, and we hide behind these to defend our overreactions and to defend our bad behavior and to rationalize our procrastination and to justify our neglect of certain things or our avoidance of other things or maybe how we avoid certain people or certain opportunities and so on and so forth. Andy Stanley said something about this that I thought was so insightful and just really challenging, but here's what he said. He said, at the root of an excuse is blaming something internal on something external. Because we see these things and we think to ourselves, you know what? I just can't accept that I'm the problem. I just can't accept the fact that this is something wrong with me. So it's got to be someone else or something else out there because it can't be me. And that's when my paper walls go up. And the crazy thing is, I feel hidden and protected behind my paper walls. But really all I'm doing is sort of boxing myself in and just holding myself back, all because of something that I'm unwilling to admit to myself. So I'll give you a very light example of this, just a very light illustration, and I know that the implications with all of this are so much more significant, and we're going to get into some of that in just a moment, but just on a lighter note. So on Christmas, just a couple of weeks ago, this past Christmas, I finally got around to watching the classic Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life, for the very first time. Okay, so almost 48 years old, and all these years I've managed to avoid watching It's a Wonderful Life. And I had all of these reasons, right? Excuses It's just not really my kind of movie, or it just kind of looks old and cheesy, or I'm just not really a fan of black and white films, whatever. I just didn't want to watch it, right? I had no interest in it, which is fine because it's a movie, and there's a lot of movies that I've never had any interest in watching, and so I've never watched them. But then on Christmas Eve, if you were here for our services on Christmas Eve, I talked about It's a Wonderful Life. If you remember, I was using it as an example of these classic, maybe some of our favorite Christmas movies that are really more like love stories. And so I was talking about how George Bailey falls in love with Mary, and I was talking about this like I knew what was going on. But the truth is, I had to Google it. That's the only reason I knew George Bailey and Mary had a love story or whatever. And the only reason I talked about it is because I thought some of you might have liked it and it might connect with you. So anyway, Christmas morning, I'm sitting in my living room all by myself because I wake up roughly 3 hours before anybody else in the house. So I've got the whole room to myself, and I'm thinking, you know what, I might as well watch a Christmas movie. And I'm scrolling through the streaming apps, and there it is. And I thought, just in that moment, for whatever reason, all my excuses were gone. So I thought, I'm going to watch It's a Wonderful Life. And you know what? I loved it. I actually loved it. I mean, from start to finish, I was totally into it. Even at the end, I'm in my living room all by myself getting choked up because there's all these people and they're coming to help George, all these people that George had helped through the course of his life, and now they're coming to help him raise all this money to keep his business open and to keep him out of jail. And I'm getting choked up thinking, it really is a wonderful life. So this is probably going to be one of those like must-watch movies every year for me, which is, I really truly enjoyed it that much. Now here's the point to that little story, and it barely makes this point, but this is the point. The excuses you hold on to are keeping you from something. They're keeping you from something, and all of us do this. We all have paper walls, and we're walling ourselves in, and we all have these becauses that are really just excuses. And the truth is, you don't accept these from your kids. You hear these excuses, these paper walls, and you don't accept them from your coworkers, you don't accept them from your teammates. So why would you accept them from you? And the real question, here's the real question, why are we talking about this in church? Well, you've already heard it once or twice this morning that, one of our passions as a church, something we're extremely passionate about, is helping you grow closer to God in your faith journey. We talk about all the time that is our mission, our purpose, to bring everyone closer to God. And here's the reality, that there is a direct connection between following Jesus, growing closer to God, and being willing to push through our paper walls. And here's why I say that, and this is so important, that our excuses, if we will let them, will rule over us. In fact, an excuse can become more like a dictator in our life, a king or a master over us that will actually dictate the direction of our life if we let it. In other words, excuses will always compete for lordship in your life. And as Christians, we can spend the rest of our lives either following Jesus or serving our excuses, but we can't do both because one will always upstage the other. And so you have to decide, you have to choose, which is it going to be? And I know I may not know all of you very well, I may not know all of your stories very well, but here's what I'm guessing is true for you, that really none of us want to look back at the end of our lives and think, man, I spent my whole life hiding behind these stupid, flimsy, made-up paper walls of lies that I believed about myself. So the writer of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament scriptures speaks directly to this. In fact, he was writing to a group of Christians, and it's not even really a book, it's more like a letter. In fact, it's more like a sermon that he was writing to this group of Christians in the first century who were really struggling. I mean, they were trying to follow Jesus, and they were facing all sorts of challenges and pressures and opposition, and it was so intense that it was pushing them to the brink of just giving it all up and just walking away from all of it. And so the writer of Hebrews comes along and says, listen, guys, I know times are tough. I know it's been challenging, and I know you have your reasons for wanting to walk away. And I know your reasons have reasons, but if you will just hear me out, and this is what he says. This is Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, but he says this, let us throw off everything that hinders. Now, this is just the first part. We're going to take this piece by piece, but we're going to see this in just a moment, that he's talking about running a race as a metaphor for life and faith, which is really interesting. In fact, he's not the first scripture writer to make that comparison, which is honestly perfect, right? Because running a race requires discipline. It requires direction and determination. And when you're running a race, there's always this destination out in front of you that's sort of urging you to run well and to finish strong. And that's life. Right? That's also our faith journey. So here he says, anything that hinders your progress. Throw off anything that hinders. And he's not actually even talking about things that are necessarily bad. He's not making a distinction between good things or bad things, just anything that could potentially slow you down or trip you up. He says, throw it off. Because the last thing you want when you're in a race is to carry anything that adds unnecessary weight. And ancient athletes took this principle very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that they were like, we're not taking any chances. We're just going to throw everything off. And I mean, literally everything, right? In fact, one commentary that I looked at described it like this. I mean, these athletic events that within this culture, I mean, they were a big deal, kind of like the original Olympic Games. And so there'd be these arenas, and the athletes would enter this arena at the start of their event, and they were wearing these long flowing robes, kind of this whole ceremony. And then they would get to the start of their event, and they would throw these robes off. And then they would run their race basically naked, okay? And I look at that picture and I think, man, that's dedication to the game right there. I mean, they are that committed. They're like, we're not going to let anything weigh us down or slow us down. And listen, I have all sorts of reasons why I'm not a runner now. That's just one more reason why I wouldn't be a runner then. But think about the boldness and the vulnerability in that image. I mean, these runners just completely stripped down, free of anything that's weighing them down. Maybe a little too free by our standards today, but no pretense, no hiding, just total transparency. So the writer here, the author says, throw off anything and everything that hinders. And he continues, the sin that so easily entangles. And now he's talking about something that's much more urgent and sinister. He's talking about those attitudes, those actions, the lifestyles and the beliefs or behaviors that ultimately end up hurting ourselves or hurting someone else. And really, in its simplest, most practical, experiential, most human level, this is what sin really boils down to. And sometimes we think, well, I need a list. I need to know what's on the list, things that I can't do, what's against the rules. And honestly, I mean, when we follow Jesus through the Gospels, we get a very different understanding of what this was really. I mean, if we're looking for a list and very specific things, we're kind of missing it. It basically boils down to anything that hurts you or someone else. Because think about this. I mean, God so loved the world, right? We're most of us familiar with that verse, what the Bible, what the scriptures teach. And he so loves everyone in the world. So of course he doesn't want the people that he loves to get hurt or to hurt each other. And when we do, it breaks his heart. It breaks God's heart. And as a parent, I think we can kind of resonate with this on just a very, again, human level. Right? I mean, as a father, I remember looking at my kids, and even when they were little, some of the times that I would get the most upset with my kids was when, I told them 100 times not to do something, but they just kept on doing it anyway. And then, eventually they ended up hurting one of their siblings or hurting themselves. And I remember having this experience while I'm watching one of my kids who's young and they're hurt. They've hurt themselves and they're crying, they're upset, and I'm looking at them and I'm upset. And I'm trying to understand, why am I so upset with my child who's hurt? And I realized, it's because my heart's broken. Because they've experienced pain in their life right now that is not what I wanted for them. And so again, on a very human level, this helps us understand maybe just in some way what God feels and how he experiences and how he looks at this. But coming back to our paper walls now, just to get very, very specific with an example, I think probably most of us agree that when we lie, it hurts people. It hurts. when we are deceptive or dishonest, I mean, it breaks trust. It can ruin relationships. It can destroy marriages and whole families and even whole communities. Lying is a sin. I think we understand that. I think we know that. So, what about when we lie to ourselves? I mean, isn't that at the root of all of our excuses? And isn't that what our paper walls are really made of? These lies that we've believed about ourselves? Maybe even lies that we've told ourselves? So the author says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. In other words, no more excuses. No more excuses. And, he goes on, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So run, he says. In fact, what he's saying here is keep on running with perseverance. Now, he's not talking about a sprint, right? This is not a 100-yard dash. This is a marathon, which is why he's encouraging us to run with perseverance. And actually, the language here carries this idea of active and ongoing endurance. And the only time you need to endure something is when it gets really, really tough, right? We don't have to endure things that are nice or easy or pleasant, but we endure things that get really challenging and difficult and unpleasant, right? It means struggling and effort, which is interesting because isn't that when we're most prone to making our excuses? When stuff gets real and things suddenly are a lot harder than we expected, and now circumstances have gotten a lot more complicated than we wanted them to, and things are taking a lot longer than we hoped they would, and we're not seeing results as quickly as we hoped we would, and that's when I so often cue my excuses. And the paper walls start going up. And our running turns into a walk. And then our walk turns into binge watching Netflix on the couch. And isn't that so often where our New Year's resolutions ends up? I mean, I'm just speaking from experience here. So he says, push past that. Run with perseverance, with endurance, the race marked out for us. Now, no matter where you are in your faith journey, and I know we're all at different places in our faith journey, but no matter where you are, I mean, I'm guessing you have some goals for your life, right? You have some kind of picture in your mind of where you'd like to end up and what could or should be true for you and your family. And so, in essence, that is your race, right? But if you are a follower of Jesus and you believe and you understand that God has a plan and a purpose for your life and for your family, that's the race that the author is alluding to here. That's the race that's been marked out for us. That's the race that you and I are running right now. So here's what the author is urging us to do. He's basically saying, listen, would you just throw off anything that's holding you back? And anything and everything that threatens to keep you from winning at your own race. I mean, no one wants to lose at their own race, right? And here's the underlying risk and what's really at stake here. That people who keep making excuses rarely make much of a difference. Because paper walls keep us from ever really engaging. They make us small. They make us self-absorbed. They rob us of the life that God has created us to live. So throw off these excuses, he says. Push through these paper walls, and here's how. And now as we get to the last part of this statement in the middle of this sermon that this author is writing to this group of Hebrews, he's speaking directly to followers of Jesus. But I want to invite all of us now to just lean into this principle, lean into this thought, because this is absolutely life-changing. No matter where you are in your faith journey, just lean in, because he gives us one more step. And I'm just going to read the whole statement from the start again here. He says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, and here it is. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. He says, fix your eyes. Literally, Look away from everything else. Look away from everything. I mean, that includes your fears and your excuses. Look away from your inadequacies and your lack of resources and your past failures. Look away from all of that and fix your eyes. Put all of your focus and all of your attention on Jesus, because he is our source of faith. He is our strength. He is our resilience. Jesus is life. And the author of Hebrews tells us all of this. He gives us this powerful statement right in the middle of this sermon that he's writing. He gives us these instructions because he understood what was true for his original readers, and he understood what's true for us even today. That you and I cannot follow Jesus if we will not push through our paper walls. We cannot follow Jesus if we will not push through our paper walls, because the reality is that when we really decide to follow Jesus, he's going to expose these things. In fact, he's going to lead us through these things. And the only way that we'll ever actually follow him is if we stop making excuses and we push through the paper walls that just box us in and hold us back and keep us from moving forward. And when we do, these things that used to look so scary to us, these things that used to just shut us down and push us away, will actually start to look like opportunities. So just imagine for a moment. Just imagine what you could do. Just imagine the places you could go, the experiences you could have, the person that you could become without these paper walls standing in your way. So here's what I think all of us need to start doing right now as we look at 2026 and the changes that we want to make, the goals that we have, and all that the paper walls threaten to keep us from. Here's what we should be doing. My invitation. Just start poking holes in your paper walls. It's so easy. Just start poking holes in these paper walls. I mean, just challenge, like, why, as soon as you're about to say another because, like, why am I saying that right now? Do I actually believe what I'm about to say? What am I really so afraid of? And it's like every time we want to back down from one of these opportunities, we've got a long list of why nots. But what if instead we just started asking, why not? Why not initiate that conversation? Whoops, that one's got a little more solid. Hold on. There we go. Why not just punch through that wall? Why not initiate that conversation or pursue that opportunity? Why not forgive that person? Why not choose to trust Jesus with my life and just follow him through these paper walls? You know, as soon as we start poking holes in these paper walls, we begin to see just how flimsy they really are, just how thin and weak they really are, and you'll begin to push through them one by one. And they'll no longer rule over you like a dictator in your life or like a master over you. They'll no longer keep you from growing and maturing and expanding your horizons and realizing your potential and becoming the you that God created you to be. You know, there's a very real connection between who you want to become and your willingness to acknowledge your excuses for what they really are. And as followers of Jesus, we cannot truly follow him if we're not willing to push through these. So, whatever you choose to carry forward with you into this new year, let's not let our excuses be one of them. Let's all choose today to just leave those behind, and I promise that if you do, you will be a better person for it. Because you'll be free to follow Jesus. Free to live your life, free to pursue all that he puts before you without hiding and spending your life hiding behind these reasons that are really no reasons at all. Would you pray with me? Father, I think by now we've all had some paper walls that have come to mind. And we've been thinking about these maybe, and maybe realizing that these have been paper walls in our life for far too long. And maybe even already we've been starting to think of some things that they've kept us from, ways that they've been holding us back. So my prayer for each and every one of us today, Lord, is that you would awaken in us such a powerful desire to pursue you and to follow you, that we would begin just one by one poking holes in these paper walls. Whatever they look like in our lives, Father, help us to push through so that we can pursue you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Cypress. Have an awesome day. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you back here next Sunday.